Welcome to the GAT Labs for Education live roundtable event, covering AI in education and insights from industry leaders, hosted by Scott Fisher. Recorded live on March 26th with our expert guests Jason Towne, Eric Curts, and Mandy DePriest. If you'd like to tune in live to our next roundtable event on April 2nd, be sure to register using the link in the description of this video.
Welcome. Thank you all for joining us for the first of two GAT Labs roundtable events on AI in education. Today's event will focus on how AI can help improve the quality of education. While everyone settles in, please take a moment to join our chat. Let us know what city and country you are joining from and which tool you use most in your daily work life. The chat messages from throughout the session will be captured, and if a response is required, a GAT Labs team member will follow up after the event. I am Scott Fisher, the head of U.S. Market Development for GAT Labs. I am in New York right now. Joining me today are a panel of guest speakers. Before we begin, let's take a moment for the guests to tell us a bit about themselves. Jason, let's start with you.
Hi, my name is Jason Towne. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I'm Director of Corporate Strategy at Squirrel AI and author of several books, including Rewiring Education, which is about technology, that I co-wrote with John Couch, who was Apple's Vice President of Education at the time. Interesting about my story is I bring a couple of perspectives. I was a high school dropout myself with a 1.5 GPA. So I bring from the inner city. So I bring the perspective of the kid who we're all kind of trying to reach. But at the same time, I eventually went on to USC and then Harvard grad school. So I'm also being able to bring a perspective from that. So that's kind of what I bring to the table here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that introduction, and I'm glad you could be here today. Mandy, would you like to go?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mandy DePriest with AI for Education. Happy to be here with you all today. Prior to my work with AI for Education, I worked in the public schools in Arkansas for 15 years. I was a fifth grade teacher. I was a library media specialist, and then I was an instructional technology coach. I also taught education technology at North Arkansas College for 3 years. So I got very interested in the transformative power of technology for instruction. I stepped out of the classroom in 2023 to join AI for Education. And since then, I've devoted myself to kind of spreading the good word about AI literacy and how we can leverage these tools, but also mitigate risk and be very responsible with them. So thank you for having me today, Scott.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. Glad to have you. And finally, Eric, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here. Excited to be learning with everybody today. My name's Eric Curts. I'm an educator from Northeast Ohio. This is my 33rd year in education. Been doing this a long time. I started off as a math teacher. I taught 7th and 8th grade math for about 7 years, and then I switched into a role as a tech coach or a tech integration specialist. Same district, just switched from teaching kids to teaching teachers. And I did that for about 21 years there at that district. In the last 12 years, I've been at the county office, and I support about 35 school districts up here in Northeast Ohio on using technology in the classroom. And so that's my day job. And then on the side, I travel all around the country working with schools and organizations and conferences on how to use AI, how to use all sorts of technology tools in the classroom, and sharing out all of my resources through my blog and YouTube channel and so forth. So excited, again, to be here with everybody today. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. We're excited to have you as well. Thank you all for joining us today for a discussion on this important topic. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Our first question today: what are the potential benefits of AI in improving the quality of education? And I encourage you all to jump in, but Mandy, would you like to start off?
Sure. Well, there are a lot of factors in this. This is a very big question. I tend to look at it through two lenses. I look at it through like a short-term lens of what can we implement right now in existing systems and structures, and then taking a long-term lens, like what are kind of the moonshot possibilities of AI where we can kind of transcend those existing systems. And that's the exciting stuff, right? Where we can get into things like totally redesigning the way we do assessments and personalized instruction, whole courses based entirely on individual student interests, things like that. But before, I always kind of have to rein myself in a little bit. I'm like, before we can get to that, we have to keep in mind that all of these potential innovations and transformations come to students through teachers. So my hot take a little bit is that we kind of need to step back and think about, what do teachers need right now, and take into account that there is a lot of widespread burnout and overwhelm, and they may not be in the most receptive state of mind to like wholesale change right away. So talking about things like productivity and efficiency and ways that teachers can free up time from kind of big time sink tasks, like say grading 75 essays, to where AI can assist them with that, and that frees up their time to do more meaningful tasks with teachers, or just to take a breath. I think that brings them to the table and makes them more willing to discuss kind of those longer term moonshot things. So that's just my initial lens of interpretation. I'd love to hear what the other panelists think.
Sure. Jason, you want to jump in?
Oh, sure. I'm a very big fan of AI in education, because had this been around when I was around, I would not have dropped that, and I probably would have had straight A's, because that's how big of a deal I think this is. I think this is the biggest change in the history of education. And I mean, that's saying a lot considering we've had the internet and all of these other things, but this is overwhelmingly going to be the most powerful thing. A lot of people still aren't accepting it. A lot of teachers I know still are very cautious of it, and for some good reasons. You know, there are still some very good issues out there, and we'll probably talk more about those. But the potential for it is like nothing we've ever seen. It gives us a chance to go to education utopia in terms of the one-on-one teacher-student ratio, which everyone would love to have, but it has been impossible to scale. This now gives us the potential to come closer to doing that, and that alone is a very big deal. I see it as being, like Andy said, a collaboration between teachers and tech. It's not going to replace teachers, but I feel like it will change the role that teachers have. It'll be a lot less on memorization and things like that, and a lot more on doing things that teachers probably want to do more, which is build the relationships with students and motivation and things like that, which we'll get into, I know, a little bit later.
Well, thank you. And how about you, Eric? Do you have something you'd like to add?
Well, I definitely would echo everything that's been shared. On the teacher end, absolutely. I see this as a tool that can come along and be an assistant for every teacher. And I think that's so important that we emphasize the word assistant. When I was in college, I was a TA, a teacher's assistant, for one of my professors. So I helped grade papers and, make notes and stuff like that. And then I became a public school teacher, and I was like, hey, where's my TA? Well, guess what? Now we all have them. If you so choose, every educator can have their own teaching assistant with AI. I like to say AI is your TA. Now, the key, though, is assistant. AI is not here to do your job. AI is here to help you do your job better. It's to be that support that comes alongside and frees up your time, does maybe 80% of the work to get things started, but then you've got your 20% to do in there as well. So absolutely, that does excite me. What I really get excited about, though, is the idea of personalized learning for students. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that as we go on, that when we really talk about revolutionizing things, absolutely support teachers, that's fantastic, all those things. But ultimately, we're here for the students. That's what it's all about. And to have AI be able to provide personalized, individualized instruction and support for students, meeting them where they're at. I saw some things popping up in the chat, people talking about maybe what about students who might, have a difficult time, hearing or seeing or reading. That as well, meeting students wherever they're at, and creating customized support and instruction for all of our learners. So I'm sure we'll dive more into that, but that's the part that really gets me excited.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, let's move on now to our second question. What are some innovative ways AI is enhancing the pedagogical experience and teaching practices? And Eric, let's go back to you to start off on that one.
Well, I guess I'll just pick up that thought then, because
Exactly.
Really, that is what gets me excited, is the personalized learning. So now I'll throw out a couple of tools by name, but I'm not saying, oh, this is the tool, but just as examples. I'm thinking of tools like Squirrel AI, or something like Conmigo, or Magic School, or Brisk Teaching, or Mizu, or there's so many out there that have a student component. So basically the idea is this. first of all, let me make sure I'm very clear. I'm not saying that we're going to turn our students loose on ChatGPT. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm talking about is using an AI tool that is a go-between between the large language model and the student. And so with a tool like School AI, just as an example, there's loads of tools out there that can do this sort of thing. A teacher can go in and create a custom AI chatbot that is specific for their students. And it could be all kinds of things. It could be an AI tutor, like, okay, this custom chatbot's going to be a science tutor, a math tutor, or maybe it's going to help with a specific project. This AI chatbot is to help students work through the writing process, or maybe the AI chatbot is going to take on a role. It's going to pretend to be Abraham Lincoln for, an event where the students are going to, chat with Abraham Lincoln, or it's going to create an interactive learning activity, like a choose your own adventure type activity, and on and on and on and on. But the point is, the teacher can easily generate that chatbot. They've got, loads and loads and loads of templates already there. You just go in and customize them. And all you do is just give a link to your students. The students click the link and they get to now have that conversation. In those cases, the students aren't logging in. There's no passwords or email. It's all, in a nice, safe walled garden there where the students are having the conversation. Their conversations are recorded for the teacher to review so that the teacher can go in and see what the student has said and how the AI has responded. But the beauty of this is now each student gets to have that personalized conversation. If there's a student who's struggling, they're not understanding this particular content, they can ask for the AI to help reteach it, and the AI will reteach it any time of day. I mean, come on, we try to be the best support we can be for our students, but there's only one of us and 125 of them, and so we can't be there for every student all the time, especially in the evening, the weekends, things like that. This allows a student to be able to have that support anytime, anywhere, and it's going to adjust to each student. Whatever their interest is, boom, it's going to let them go deeper into that and support them where they're at. So those are just a couple of quick examples there of some ideas that jumped to my mind as things that you can do right now today, not just years out in the future, but right now today, we can be providing that sort of support for our students.
Thank you. And before we move on, just if anybody else has something they'd like to add or jump in, please feel free.
Well, I'll quickly note, I just observed some things in the chat, some people commenting on their inability to access things like that due to security restrictions and things like that on their district, which is not uncommon. We see a lot of districts taking a very cautious approach towards access to AI tools. So that being the case, I think you can still transform your teaching practice, even if you don't have students interacting directly with AI, in terms of just your instructional planning and using AI as a thought partner to help you. I'll cite an example quickly from our own. We're currently teaching a course on AI literacy for students online in Queens, and we had some issues with students interacting, or rather not interacting virtually in the chat room. And so we just went to AI and quickly asked it to help us brainstorm a few ideas to help increase the level of engagement in this virtual course. And could we have thought up those ideas on our own? Sure, given the time, but we have other, commitments as well. And so we were able to just quickly generate a lot of ideas that totally reformatted how we did the next lesson. We actually then had a few ideas of our own stemming from that. And so the next lesson, we ended up implementing those, and it was much more interactive in terms of the students. So even just using foundational models like ChatGPT or Claude as a thought partner as you're planning can help impact your instruction as well.
Okay, I'm sorry, Jason, real quick. I just want to jump back to Eric as a follow-up question. I'll come back to you. Eric, I'm trying to follow the chat, but boy, they're firing away here. But
They sure are.
One question is jumping out at me in particular. Where can we get the chatbots Eric is talking about?
So I just dropped the link into the chat there. So I have bit.ly, like shortened links. I have bit.lys for most all of my resources. That particular one is bit.ly/Curts. That's my last name, CURTS -chatbots. So bit.ly/Curts -chatbots. That'll take you to a document that has all the resources for the session I do when I do the session on AI chatbots for students. And it talks a lot about, the different tools that are out there, but it also goes into how to use these appropriately with our students as well. And there's loads and loads of examples in there. And again, I'm not saying these are the only tools, but they're all good representative tools, things like, Brisk and Magic School and School AI and so forth. I only share tools that have a robust free version. So yes, all of these tools have a paid option, but I only share tools that have a robust free version. So anybody can try these out. And again, good point that was mentioned earlier. Not all schools have approved all of these tools. You always have to go with what your school has approved. Make sure you're using what has been approved. But the nice thing is, all of these companies that I've listed there are ones that are very quick to work with schools. They will sign student data privacy agreements. They'll do all that sort of stuff. They have a very good track record of that.
Thank you. I appreciate the information. Jason, I'm sorry to have interrupted you. It's just the chats are rolling by so quickly. I wanted to make sure I addressed that particular one before it went off my screen. So please, going back to the original question, what are some innovative ways AI is enhancing the pedagogical experience and teaching practices? Did you have a comment that you'd like to make on that before we move on?
I did have one point. It's not directly to that, but it's next to it. It's what we have a long history in the U.S. and around the world of getting into technologies that fail. And, there's always a lot of hype around new technologies that come and they fail. And a lot of those technologies were very good technologies, iPads, things like that just never made it in. And then the technologies get blamed for the failing. And the reason that happens is because there's a lack of teacher training that comes along with these new technologies. And the same thing is going to happen with AI and all of these tools that teachers might be given if they're not trained properly. And so I think it's very important for administrators to understand that and not just toss these tools out there to teachers and say, all right, this is going to change everything, because it's not. It's not going to change anything unless the teachers are trained properly to use them first, and then they're using them in the right way. So I think that that's very important for people to understand.
Yeah, that's a common chant that we're hearing is, making sure the teachers are prepared first. So thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so before we move on to our third question, let's get a little bit more interactive. I mean, I'm very impressed with the amount of chats that have taken place, but we're going to pop a poll up on the screen. So for the people that are viewing this, down towards the bottom right of your screen next to the chat, which many of you have seemed to have already found your way to, there's a polls option. So if you would, once we put the poll there, you should see an indicator, and now it's there. You can go ahead and click on that poll. And if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to walk through. So what we're really asking here is we're trying to get a consensus from the audience, at least. What are the biggest challenges in integrating AI into the learning experience? And we've provided a couple of options there. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to submit your vote, then we can take a look at what everybody's thinking. So we'll give everybody a moment to do that. And I'm just going to choose a generic one here. Okay, so are we seeing a trend here yet? So I think perhaps, just really quickly looking at it, pretty good question responses that we provided, in that there seems to be a pretty equal amount of interest, at least in two of them. So lack of teacher training, professional development, which is something we've been speaking about here today, and concerns about students relying too heavily on technology, which makes perfect sense. Those are all things that everybody is keenly aware of, and are some of the issues we're facing. So the balancing the technology with traditional human-centered teaching methods seems to be third, followed by resistance to adopting AI as a okay, and limited access to AI tools due to budget. Well, that's actually encouraging. That's one of the lesser chosen problems, and that either means A, schools are doing well financially, or B, schools are benefiting from what Eric has pointed out to be many free tools that are available to them. So maybe some combination of the two. But all right, terrific. Well, thank you all for taking part in the poll. I'm going to move us forward here, and we're going to move on to our third question today, which is, how can AI improve student engagement and motivation in the classroom? And Jason, I want to go to you first for your thoughts on this, and then we'll get to the others as well.
Well, I think motivation is by far the most important thing when it comes to teaching and learning for kids. That's clearly the one thing that will set whether or not they're going to learn it apart from whether they'll learn it or not. Because if they want to learn something and they're motivated to learn something, you can't stop them no matter what you do. But the opposite is always also true, right? If they don't want to learn something and they don't understand why it's relevant to what their life is, then it's going to be very difficult to teach them. And so that's what happened with me. When I was in high school, I had no idea why I was needed to learn any of the things I needed to learn, and teachers weren't very good back then at explaining why. So I just tuned out, and that's what eventually caused me to drop out. But then when I got to college at USC for undergrad, and then later at Harvard, I picked my own courses. So I'm now able to kind of make sure everything is relevant to what I want to do. And then I got straight A's all the way through. So that's a great example of how important making things relevant are to teaching kids. And AI is a game changer when it comes to that. And there's two kinds of AI, right, that we'll probably be talking about here. There's the generative AI, and then there's the AI that changes, as you go, adaptive AI. Both of those are good. The adaptive AI is great, because it goes to what Eric was talking about, and personalization. It gives us a chance to let kids go at their own pace, which is something we've never been able to do because teachers have too many kids that they're trying to teach at the same time. The generative AI part, though, in terms of motivation, is what I'm very excited about, because with that, it allows kids the opportunity to do things that they'd never have been able to do before. It allows teachers to do things. For instance, if I have 10 kids in front of me, it would be very difficult for me to come up with a learning plan for each 10 based on what they are good at or what they're excited about before AI. Now I can go in and put a prompt in to ChatGPT, and I can get that immediately for every single kid. All I needed to do was tell it a little bit about what kid was interested in, and here's the lesson. Here's the lesson. Here's what this kid is interested in. How can I combine them? Boom, here it comes. Within seconds, you get that. And so that's the difference maker to me, is the relevancy and the fact that it now allows us to touch in on each individual kid's motivations. And my one last thing is, my son was a kind of a C student before ChatGPT came out about a couple of years ago, and he was in 11th grade at the time, 12th grade when it came out, and he started to use it with my encouragement. And the great thing is he's able to it's able to spit out things 100 different ways until you understand it, which is something human teachers aren't able to necessarily do. Now, we're really good at some things, but being able to explain it in 50 different ways is not usually one of them. But with him, what he did was he went on there and he asked it over and over again, explain it in a different way, until boom, one of those ways clicked in his head and he loved it. The reason I'm bringing that up is because it goes to motivation, because it makes them then interested in the topic. When we learn something and we understand it, we become more interested in it no matter what. And that helps them with that. And that helped him. And he went from a C student to an A student because of how he was using it at home, doing these things, and then coming to me and then talking about it after what he learned and getting my input on it. So that's kind of what can happen in classrooms as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Mandy, do you have something you'd like to add, or Eric?
Yeah, I'll co-sign on everything Jason just said about tailoring instructional content to student interests. And I'll add too, in terms of, I get very excited about AI's potential to increase accessibility, because I think that is a big piece that goes hand in hand with motivation, right? If I can't access the content, either because of a learning disability or a lack of background knowledge or just a lack of interest, then I'm not going to engage with it as much. So like we see a lot of assistive technology that is powered by AI. And so now we have opportunities for like real-time translation and captioning. We have opportunities for text-to-speech and interacting, speech-to-text and interacting like in voice mode with things. That is going to increase accessibility for our students who maybe most need it. I love the framing that Jose Antonio Bowen uses in his book, Teaching with AI, which is a great resource. And he talks about motivation in terms of I can, I care, I matter. So the student needs to think I can, as in I am capable of doing this work, in which AI is helpful for building up background knowledge, filling in gaps in their learning quickly. They need to think I care, as in like I want to do this work, like what Jason was saying about they have to be motivated to learn the work, which speaks to the need to like kind of build a context for, why this will be helpful for you to know, maybe couching it in things that you are interested in. And then I matter in terms of like, it's important that I am doing this work and not say an AI. So like if students are aware that this technology exists, then maybe a natural follow-up question to that is, well, then why should I worry about writing essays or things like that if it's just one click and I can get this technology to do it for me, which speaks to the need to really couch our instruction in, human competencies and durable skills. And like, why do we still need people who can write essays or write novels or screenplays, if we have AI that will do that for us? So that's a really helpful framework that I tend to use for thinking about motivation, as well as, I get excited about accessibility.
Okay, that's great. And how about you, Eric? Do you have something you'd like to add to this question?
Well, the last thing I'll say as far as motivation, again, I would absolutely echo everything that's been shared. Wonderful points. One thing to say about motivation is, if you want to get your kids excited about learning, AI can absolutely be a way to do that. But earlier, I know some people were mentioning, well, some of the tools I mentioned about personalized learning might not be available to them. So let's take a step back and say, what if, as the teacher, you say, okay, I'm going to use ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, something like that, but I'm going to use it as a whole class activity where the students are not touching the AI. I'm the one who's touching it. I'm using the AI, but I'm engaging the students. I'm pulling them in. I'm going to drop a link into the chat here in just a second. I've got a video and a blog post and a resource document all about using AI as a interactive activity where the teacher is the one who is still in charge. I'm dropping that in the chat right now. And here's the idea. Basically, as a teacher, and you can do this with kindergartners. You can do this with any grade. You can say, hey, guys, we've been studying about, I don't know, let's say we've been learning about sharks, in our science class this week. I'm just using that as an example. Well, guess what? We have a special guest in class today. A shark has joined us in class today, and you guys can interview it. You can ask it anything you want. Well, basically, what you're going to do is you're going to go to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, and you're going to put in a prompt telling it to be a shark and say, hey, you're going to be interviewed by the students in my class. This is their age. Make sure you respond appropriately for that age group. You're going to be playing the role of a shark, and now the students can start asking questions, and you're the one typing them in. You're still putting the questions in, but now the students are engaged. At the link I put in there, I've got a really good prompt you can use if you want your students to interview a historical figure or a character from a book. Hey, we've been reading The Great Gatsby. Let's interview Jay Gatsby, or whatever they think. I had a teacher have the students interview a hurricane. They were doing like a wild weather unit. And so the AI pretended to be a hurricane and the kids interviewed it. But you can also do AI debates where the students are debating against the AI on a topic from class. You can do AI choose your own adventure stories where it generates that. And as a class, they're voting on what we decide in the story. All of these things can be done, tomorrow for free with ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, without having to use something like School AI or Magic Tool or things like that. So you can use these right away in your class with your students, and the motivation just skyrockets as they get so excited about being able to be involved in that activity with the AI. So I put that link in there. Feel free to dive on into that and take advantage of any of those prompts that are in there.
Great. So, Eric, we're going to stick with you for a moment, and we're going to move on to question number 4 with how can AI support teachers in identifying at-risk students and provide timely interventions? And I'd be happy to hear from everybody else as well. But Eric, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, the nice thing is many of the tools do have the ability to summarize where students are at in their work. So if you're using a tool like Class Companion to have students writing, and then the AI is going to provide feedback on the student's writing. If you're using a tool like Magic School and you're having the students, or School AI, and you're having the students go in and chat with the AI, it's going to summarize the student's conversation. If you're using a tool like Snorkel, oh God, I got to give a shout out to Snorkel. Snorkel is the one that allows students to speak their responses and or use a whiteboard to draw out their responses so they can work out math problems or draw diagrams. It also can summarize their responses. The point is, as a teacher, if you're using a tool like Class Companion, Snorkel, School AI, Magic School, any of those, to have students doing their writing, speaking their answers, doing their diagrams, what's going to happen is when you go in as a teacher, the AI is going to surface up key insights about your students. It's going to be like, oh, here are the most common problems that the students are having. These are the most common mistakes. For example, in Snorkel, there's an insights tab you go to for any question, and it'll be like, these are the most common things that the students are struggling with. That is so helpful as a teacher because, it's going to be able to go through, again, 30 kids in a class or 125 kids throughout the whole day. And it's going to be able to see the patterns as far as where students are struggling, but it can also identify individual students. Here's a group of students that are specifically struggling with this particular topic. Now, all of that you can do for free in those tools. A lot of these tools in their paid versions, they end up adding something additionally to that. A lot of times there's like a district dashboard that can pull data from, grade levels and classrooms. And again, identify particular needs. So that I'm so excited about, for the ability to alert teachers as to where their students are struggling and which particular students need additional assistance. So maybe the AI is doing some grading, but again, it's not that it's replacing the teacher. It's helping us be more informed about where to go now and pull certain students aside into a small group and give them additional support.
Well, thank you very much. Mandy, you have something you'd like to add to that?
Well, that was an excellent response, and I don't think anyone could say it any better than how Eric just put it. Thank you for that. So I will just maybe put a point on the importance of human oversight in this, because we know that AI tools can contain bias. And so a lot of times it might flag things that reflect, say, a student's, a non-native English speaker or something like that. It may flag the student as like misunderstanding a concept because they may not have expressed it in terms that the AI was used to seeing. So I wouldn't just take the AI's assessment of my student data at face value without aligning it to my observations in the classroom and my professional expertise and my understanding of the student and their needs. Just always kind of looking at it with that critical eye instead of just like kind of just click and done and acting. But I think, Eric, that's something I know you address.
Absolutely. Yeah. As I've said before, AI is not here to do your job. It's here to help you do your job better. And all the sessions I do on grading, the actual title of the session is Guided Grading with AI. And it's about having the human in the loop constantly. You still need to read every essay. This is not something where you don't read the essays, but it is an assistant. It's a second set of eyes. It's a second opinion. It can help bring, some additional perspectives to it, but you still have to be, deeply involved in that grading process. Absolutely, Mandy. I'm totally right there with you.
Okay. And Jason, did you want to comment on this as well?
Just real quick. I think that we don't really necessarily need AI to identify the at-risk students because they pretty much know who those are. But what it's good at is figuring out how to reach those at-risk students specifically. And so what I noticed some teachers are doing who use this and embrace it is that they'll take the problems of the most at-risk students and then they'll go to the ChatGPT or something and say, here's one of my at-risk students. Here's kind of where they're struggling with. Can I have 10 ideas on how maybe I can better reach them? And then they're going to give you the 10 ideas. And out of those, you might say, okay, well, these 2 are really good ideas. And then you start breaking it down more and more. Can you break down number 1 for me a little bit more? And then you do. And the great thing about these chatbots is you can just keep going back and forth like this all day until you come up with a plan on your own that now you can take into your classroom and try and reach that kid. That doesn't work. Well, guess what? You do the whole process over again. You come up with a whole new idea because remember, it started with 10 to start with. And I think doing that is giving teachers an opportunity to reach at-risk students and change things way more than they've ever had before AI. And that's why I'm just so excited about it, because like I said, if this technology was around when I was in school, for not just me, but for also my teachers being able to recognize how to reach me, everything would have changed.
Right. Sure. Okay. Anybody else have anything on this before we move on to the next question?
I'll build on what Jason said. You
Okay.
called to mind a specific situation like when I was teaching that happened to me all the time, wherein like I had a commercial curriculum that my district had provided for me to use, and I would work through the lesson, and it would even maybe come with some suggested interventions for students who maybe didn't get it the first time. But what to do if those still don't work? Like I would eventually hit a wall, right? And so I would find myself in a position of I've tried all the things that have been suggested. I've tried all the things that have immediately come to mind. And I still have students who, for whatever reason, are struggling with this. So it would have been a game changer for me. I left the classroom in 2023. So I like just kind of missed the good access to AI for instructional planning. But if I could have then gone to it as a thought partner and said, I've tried this, 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 and this, and it still hasn't worked. What should I do? Suggest alternate teaching methods, and then continue to work. Like it's almost like having your own little, like Eric said, a teaching assistant or a PLC that is just always there and available for you to brainstorm ideas. So I think that's a great idea, Jason.
And not just a teaching assistant, but it's almost its own form of professional development in and of itself. If you use it like that, it's taking professional development to levels we've never seen before. Just because teachers can go in at their own time, anytime, and say, I'm struggling teaching this lesson, only half my students are learning it. What do you suggest? And again, you get a list and you start breaking down that list. You always want to ask for multiple things, right? You don't want to, if you just ask it for one solution, it's only going to give you one solution. If you don't specify how many, it's probably only going to give you one solution. But if you say, give me 10 ideas, then you can pick and choose which one of those ideas to grasp and then go for based on your own, individual needs.
Yeah, or it will even cause you to think of totally new ideas on your own based on your understanding of your students and your context that you maybe would have got to eventually, but now you've gotten to it that much faster. So I love it as a thought partner. That's nice.
Exactly. And then you can have it expand on your idea the same way. That's right.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, so let's move on to our final question here. And again, I just want to point out, I don't know how easily you guys can see the chats, but some really great stuff taking place in the chats that we've pointed out that it will be shared with everybody afterwards, as well as the recording this. Everyone will receive an email, because I think there's some really great back and forth taking place there and some great resources being shared in there. So we'll make sure we get that out to everybody. So for our final question, how does AI contribute to developing soft skills and critical thinking in students? And Mandy, I'd like to start with you on this one, please.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things we talk about a lot in AI for Education when we do our workshops on redefining assessment is we talk about durable skills. And we draw a lot on research from America Succeeds and their identification of durable skills and the extent to which they're in demand in the workforce. And like going forward in the future, as AI becomes more and more entwined in more and more industries, it is going to be those soft skills, those human-centered skills that set you apart from the AI. Like we have an AI that can do a lot of the maybe technical stuff, but what we don't have is people who are qualified with the soft skills, to put all of that into context, to make more nuanced decisions around that, within the wider environment of our particular industry and our particular goals, things like that. So actually, I would say that AI kind of forces us to focus on developing soft skills or durable skills, like critical thinking, like digital literacy, which is a huge, like a lot of kids today are presumed to be digitally literate because they are digitally native. Every kids today, they were born with technology, but actually a lot of times their proficiencies are limited more to like social media and gaming and things like that, and not necessarily things like lateral reading or determining source validity. Or even just evaluating the quality of an AI response. So it kind of forces us, as we incorporate AI into our practice, to put the spotlight on those skills and say, okay, let's look at these pieces. Here's an AI-generated text. Here's a human-generated text. What do you notice about these? How could you improve on one or the other? Things like that. And so we'll build in these mechanisms gradually over time. If we're purposefully and intentionally redesigning our assessment to incorporate AI, then we're putting in opportunities for kids to evaluate AI outputs, to question AI outputs, to check the source validity. I saw a question earlier in the chat, I think it was from Paul. He was saying, how do you verify the accuracy of information when you are, say, interacting with these AI chatbots? And I would say that that's a great conversation to have in the moment with students. And say, sometimes we can't always rely on what these AIs are saying. So does this jive with what we already have learned about this book character or this shark or whatever? And so there are opportunities to kind of bake that into your existing instruction instead of teaching it as a separate standalone thing that I think really allow us to integrate them into not only our AI literacy instruction, but also like our content learning as well.
All right. Okay. Jason, anything you'd like to add to that, or?
Yeah, so before the soft skills, though, I think Mandy pointed on something important about verifying the accuracy of the info, because we do still get, a lot of AI, what we call hallucinations, where it's saying something to you that's not accurate, but it's saying it in a way that it's absolutely sure it's accurate. And, it just seems like, oh, yeah, I know what I'm talking about. So we still have to be very careful when it comes to that. Now that will improve over time. It already has. It's way better than it was even just a year or two ago. And it's going to improve more and more. And because now they've added, links to where they're getting this information from in the chatbot, that goes a long way to helping it. But I think like what I do is when I'm researching something, in the past I would just, I'll do like most people, go to Google and go to these resources. Now I do use chatbots, but I go in thinking to myself, okay, this might or might not be right. And one of the tricks I use is I use multiple chatbots. I use Claude and I use ChatGPT, and I, use Gemini a little bit, but mostly those other two. And I ask them, what do you think about this input from this other chatbot? And I kind of have them fact checking themselves a little bit. And then I also, of course, I still have the internet. So depending on how important something is, whether it's right or not, will depend on how much time and effort I put into that. That's kind of what I want to say about accuracy. But now soft skills is very important because AI, like everything else, AI gives us an opportunity to work on those. And I see soft skills as being a way to AI-proof the future of kids, because that's one of the things that AI is not going to be able to replicate anytime soon, if ever, is whether or not a kid has whether or not you have emotional intelligence, whether or not you have social intelligence, whether or not, you have creative ability. AI is not going to replace that. These are the things you're going to need in the workplace from here on, because AI can't replace that. And so let's take creative thinking. I mean, not creative, but critical thinking and how important that is, right? With AI, you can have it debate both sides, right? So if you have an argument, here's one argument about abortion or whatever, and here's the other side. You can have it given both sides. It can debate itself, but then you can also put in your information, and you can have it to where it's challenging you to think outside of the box and even what it says. So to me, education is not about teaching kids, what to think, which has been in the past, but more like how to think, which is kind of what the role of colleges have been as well. And this is just a different variation of teaching kids how to think instead of what to think.
Thank you. And Eric, I'll give you the last word on this unless someone has a follow-up after you.
Well, that's fantastic. I love everything everybody shared there. I guess if I'm going to, speak to soft skills, critical thinking, things like that related to students, I think I would go back to the idea of having students interacting with the AI and having the AI basically playing a role in that interaction. There are tools like mirror talk, like you're looking to a mirror. That's created by Swivel. That's a free tool. That's all about reflection. This is a tool where you can create a reflection question, and then the students click the link and they literally talk to the AI. The first question is the question you start with. Based upon the student's response, the AI will then generate 2 or 3 questions specific to that student to help guide them through the reflection process on, the experience they had today, the lesson you covered in class, the chapter they read last night, whatever it would be. There's other ways you can accomplish this. for example, Google for years, they've had a tool called Interview Warm-Up. That's another neat one where students can have a pretend interview with the AI, where the AI is going to ask them questions and they're going to answer questions and go through a pretend interview. Now, you could also just do this with some of the tools I mentioned earlier, like School AI and, Magic School and Brisk, where they could debate an AI or they could interview an AI as if it was, somebody in a particular career. For example, if they were learning about careers, all of these sort of things can allow students to have interactions and practice in a low stakes, low risk environment. They can practice having an interview. They can practice having a conversation. They can practice, speaking about what they learned in class today in a way that allows them, if they make a mistake, no worries, they can just try it again, and the AI isn't going to be judging them. So I think there's a lot of possibility there where we can work on some of these skills, critical thinking, communication, things like that, and actually leverage the AI for that. Now, I'm in no way saying this is replacing human interaction. I'm just saying this is a way we could say something that we look at often, like, oh my gosh, technology, it's causing people not to interact anymore. I don't want that. That's not what I mean. But we can still leverage it in a way to provide an environment where students can practice some of these skills and then, yes, transfer them into their actual conversations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And I want to thank you for your very thoughtful conversation. I think this has really been helpful. The chat has been going crazy. So the information that you're providing and the comments that you've offered have been terrific. So thank you very much to all of our panelists. I also want to thank the people that you guys haven't seen behind the scenes. We have a whole group at GAT that's been doing such a great job to make this roundtable happen. So we have Eileen, who did a tremendous amount of work to get this ready, and a bunch of other people like Enrique and the entire marketing team. So I'd be remiss if I didn't thank them while I'm thanking you. I'd like to thank all the people who have joined us today to watch this. And if you haven't already done so, please be sure to register for our next roundtable discussion. We have one coming up on the 2nd of April. And in this session, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we'll be discussing how AI can help improve the delivery of education. So again, thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you will join us for the next event as well. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we hope to see you at our second roundtable event.